There we go, YouTube. Gosh, it took almost 20 seconds for them to connect. Oh, let me get my desktop set up. Switch everything over to live chat. I will set a goal. Probably should set a short goal today. If you're watching on the replay, just fast forward to the first couple minutes. No, I can't set this up ahead of time. Okay, we have the live chat set up. And I'll just put it on my phone too as well for all messages so I can see the same messages, hopefully. I'm not seeing anybody in the chat yet. I hope you guys can see me and hear me. Says there's 4 people in here. Hey, Leanne Rayner. I was like, can anybody see me or hear me? Hey, Kathy. Okay, trying to get the chat in the background and the chat on the phone to be on the same wavelength at the same time. Let's just give it a few minutes for people to come in on this Sunday afternoon. And no, it's not about Nancy Guthrie today. Although I do appreciate all the emails, people that are sending me the tips. Let's see if we can get anybody in this. I'm having I woke up with a little vertigo today. And it was kind of hard to walk in a straight line. So it might be a little hard for me to like continually look at the chat, which may make for a short video. And that is the Ramsey house in the background on the green screen. Hey, I got 13 people in here. Let's just get this thing started. And whoever comes, comes. Maybe you guys can see it on the replay if you're watching later. I am April Davis PI. I'm a licensed California private investigator. And I am going to talk a little bit today. I know a lot of you have been asking for this, and I've been very hesitant to make a video, but there is some news, believe it or not, on the John Benet Ramsey case. And just so you know, I am not working this case in any way. I never have been. I'm simply going to report on something that recently happened, actually happened in May, but it's just starting to make the news. It's regarding the death of Linda Hoffman-Pugh. Yeah, the Ramsey housekeeper. She was the Ramsey housekeeper at the time of John Benet's death. I know we're talking nearly 30 years ago, but it's kind of becoming a bigger story now. And once again, on my channel, I do have to say when we talk about true crime, that everybody we discuss here is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. You know, what we talk about is just, hearsay, things that are reported in the press. This is a very old case. Apparently, she passed on May the 2nd, but it really started, hitting the news wire yesterday. I saw it late last night and I was like, whoa. And apparently her obituary was already made public, and maybe there was 1 or 2 news agencies who had slightly reported it, but for some reason, this story that happened early in May is just now in, the end of the first week of June is starting to catch up to all the other news organizations. I'm starting to see it a lot, even since last night. I'm seeing it more today than I was seeing it yesterday. And this is very interesting to me. May she rest in peace, an 82-year-old woman. They don't list her cause of death. Hopefully it was just, natural causes just from being 82. But this is a rather interesting person in the story of the John Benet Ramsey case, because the John Benet Ramsey case was a circus, much like the Nancy Guthrie case, with all the different characters. I mean, it's like a soap opera that continues to go on. Well, welcome, Reese, and goodbye, Reese. Come back tomorrow. Thank you. So, yeah, this lady, she was the housekeeper, and she was the beloved housekeeper by the Ramseys. She was very close to the children, but especially John Benet. And, when this thing first happened and the parents were discussing, oh, thank you for the thumbs up. That'll help bring people in. When the parents were very, at the initial stages of the investigation discussing possible suspects, and her name just happened to be mentioned, Patsy said, "Oh no, Linda could never be involved in this. She's too close to John Benet." And so they just kind of left it at that. Now, remember, the police and the detective, who I don't care for, Linda Arndt, and even Alex Hunter, the DA, they were all gunning for the Ramseys. That's a figure of speech, but yeah, they were gunning for the Ramseys in the initial phase of the investigation, considering that, she was an unalived victim who was found in the home. Of course, they're going to look at the people closest to her, and that's people in the home. And so they were, it wasn't just the first couple days or couple weeks, it was years, decades that they were focused on the Ramseys. And they interviewed everybody from neighbors to uh, health workers to doctors to people that worked in the house. And when they initially interviewed this woman, from what I'm hearing, they were trying to get her to give them evidence against the Ramseys. And she wouldn't do it either. Just as they wouldn't point the finger at her, she would not point the finger at them. And she, emphatically told the police, apparently on more than one occasion, that there's no way in HELL that the Ramseys were involved in this. But as time went on and the net grew larger, how you doing, Elijah? Uh-oh, what's going to happen? I'm worried now. Am I going to have to take you out? Behave, Elijah. Okay. Uh, as time went on, they had to spread the net, kind of like in the Nancy Guthrie case. Allegedly, Tommaso Cioni, the son-in-law, was the person of interest, even though they never stated that. We're talking about the death of Linda Hoffman-Pugh. So when the Ramsey case happened, and they were focused on the Ramseys, but there was absolutely zero evidence to even indict them. And there's an old saying in the legal industry, you can indict a ham sandwich. The Ramseys could not be indicted because not only did they not have any evidence against them, but there was an overwhelming amount of physical evidence at the scene that did not match the Ramseys. Now, we were still in the early stages of DNA testing back in the day, but the DNA didn't match. Uh, so they decided to widen the net when they couldn't get the evidence they were looking for against the Ramseys. And apparently, and this is all alleged because I'm not the Boulder Police Department, I wasn't there. Uh, okay, Elijah, come on, give me a break. uh, when they widened the net and they were talking to these people, especially people who have been employed by not only John Ramsey, but by Patsy Ramsey, who worked in the house because she was in charge of the people that worked in the house. This woman who did everything she could to protect the Ramseys, when the police kind of turned the tables on her, and, I wasn't in the room, I didn't conduct the interviews, but allegedly the police flipped the table, and said, "Hey, wonder if we were to tell you that we think you are perhaps a suspect." And apparently she was so grief stricken by that even thought that the police could think she was involved, that she then turned the table on the Ramseys and specifically tried to implicate Patsy. Now, I wasn't there. I have never worked for the Boulder Police Department. I have never conducted any private investigations regarding the John Benet Ramsey case. But they started pointing fingers at the housekeeper. And she was never listed as an official suspect, but she became a person of interest. And she not only just, flipped out over that, uh, adamantly denying her involvement, although she and her husband, who was Mervyn Pugh, even though they were married and lived in the same house, they could not provide an alibi for each other the night of the crime. Reportedly, supposedly they were having marital issues. He slept in one room, she slept on another. Apparently, they might have even slept on different floors. Both Linda Hoffman-Pugh and Mervyn Pugh could not provide alibis for each other. But she completely changed her story. And if you lie to me once, you lie to me twice, you lie to me thrice. She flipped the story and started pointing towards Patsy and, saying that the Ramseys had a bad marriage and that, Patsy was constantly depressed. She would lock herself in the bedroom and just try on new clothes that still had the tags on them, that the house was filthy all the time, unless the housekeeper was there. The housekeeper was told to keep the first floor more tidy because, that's what people would see when they came in. She claimed that the second floor constantly smelled of urine because both children had severe bedwetting issues. And, I'm not a psychiatrist, but they say that if children have bedwetting issues that are chronic, especially at the age that those children were, that there could be other bad things that we can't talk about here going on in the house. Uh, this was a woman who, like, when she was first interviewed, and they were suspecting the Ramseys, she was like, "Oh, no, like, they could never, ever harm their children. They didn't do this." But when the focus kind of was swaying in her direction, although it may have just been a head game or reverse psychology, this woman then was like, "Oh, well, Patsy Ramsey's a bad person and maybe she did it and yada, 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 yada." Now, there was never enough evidence to charge Linda Hoffman-Pugh or her husband. And in fact, Linda Hoffman-Pugh was cleared by the Boulder Police Department, just like the Guthrie family has been cleared in the Nancy Guthrie case. But yet we still don't know the how, the who, the what, the where, the when, the why. Well, we know the where, but we don't know where she is, but we know where the crime took place. But the who, what, when, where, and why, and the how, that hasn't been determined yet. And when that hasn't been determined yet, in a case like Nancy's, you can't eliminate anybody as a suspect. Now, at least in the John Benet Ramsey case, they had the number one piece of evidence, and that was the body. They knew where she was. But this woman had access to the house 5 days a week. This woman had keys to the house. This woman had access to the paper and the pens in the house. And I'm not pointing the finger at this lady. I'm going to tell you right now that early on in the game, this woman was cleared by the Boulder Police Department. And I've also heard that she always kept a light on in her porch that she refused to turn off. She had that lamp on 24 hours a day for years and said she would never, she would always keep the lamp on until John Benet, until her killer was found. Uh, so she was very supportive of trying to help the police, but she was a person of interest, as were many other characters. And Linda, and I don't want to make fun of anybody, but in news articles, if you go back to when this case happened, there was someone who referred to Linda Hoffman-Pugh as someone who wasn't well, who was described physically as a beached whale. Now, if you were to see her husband, he looked a little sus as well, kind of like Tommaso Cione. You don't want to run into Tommaso Cione in a dark alley at night. But he may be, as sweet as a teddy bear. But Linda Hoffman-Pugh and her husband, they did at some point have the fingers pointed at them when the police department and the district attorney's office didn't have enough evidence to indict anybody. They started to spread the net. Oh, hey, Kathy. And after they started to spread the net, there was a long, long list of suspects. And the police at that time, while they were investigating all these suspects, they were also trying to connect the dots to see, well, do any of these suspects have a connection? Well, Linda had a connection to Marvin or Mervyn. And by the way, the reason I slipped and I said Marvin, there was a psychic that came into the case at one time who said she saw a man, she saw the letter M, and she thought it was something like Marvin. And there was a Mervyn that was on the list. That was Linda Hoffman-Pugh's husband. Now, I'm not saying that he was involved in this. I'm just saying he was one of the people of interest on the list. And it turned out that there was a few top people on the list that were men. And one of the top suspects that was investigated but never charged was a man named Michael Landon Helgoth. Now, Michael Landon Helgoth, about 6 to 8 weeks after this crime, I think it was less than 8 weeks. I think it was mid-February, and this crime happened December 25th, 1996, I believe it was. He was found unalived. It was believed to have been a self-unaliving, but it was impossible by what happened. I think somebody took him out because somebody thought he was going to sing like a bird. And I'm not saying that he did it, but he may have been aware of who did. And as it would turn out, there was a rumor that came out, maybe decades later, that this Michael Landon Helgoth actually dated the daughter, one of the daughters, of Linda Hoffman-Pugh. And that was not Mervyn Pugh's daughter. That was Linda's daughter. Mervyn was the stepfather. And she had a large family. I don't think Mervyn was the father of any of her kids. I think it was from a former marriage. May have been more than one. But she had a large family of sons and daughters, one of which who may have been involved, romantically speaking, with this Michael Landon Helgoth, who was also a suspect or a person of interest by the Boulder Police Department. But he was never charged. Hey, Panda. And he was later found deceased. And years later, it's believed that he may have been unalived with a GUN by a left-handed suspect. Now, this camera is mirrored, so you're seeing everything backwards. But I'm left-handed. Michael Helgoth was right-handed. And he was found with a pillow over his face at the time that he was found. Well, that didn't happen, Kathy. He, this Michael Landon Helgoth that was found deceased with a gunshot wound on the left side of his head was a right-handed man. They found him with a pillow over his face. He was lying face up, pillow over his face, and he would have had to put the weapon in his right hand, go around like this, and that's impossible. Now, sure, he could have just used the other hand, but guess what? When he was found, his right arm and hand were stretched out next to his body with the weapon in his hand. So imagine, he had the weapon in his right hand, put a pillow over his face, then goes like this and manages to, that's impossible. Even with a snub nose, you wouldn't be able to even get your hand on the trigger to do that. And then after you've unalived yourself and part of your head is missing, your brain is no longer in the body. I'm just going to be careful what I say here. You would then, even though you're already gone, you are a DEAD person, you are to put your hand to the right and very carefully place the weapon in your hand with your finger around the trigger, inside the trigger guard. That's impossible. That could never happen. And that man's death was ruled a suicide. Well, an unaliving, an intentional self-unaliving. We have to be careful what we say here because it's YouTube. So now it turned out it was coincidentally the timing of that was right after Alex Hunter and the Boulder Police Department chief did a press conference, and they said, "We know who you are. The umbrella of suspicion is shrinking. We got you." That's what they were trying to say. And when I saw that press conference, I went, "Oh my God, they don't have a clue who did this, and they're trying to lure a witness out or a suspect out." And somebody got scared, and somebody went over and took this guy out. Now, why? Was it related to the Ramsey case? Maybe. Oh, thank you for the Sunday, Carson. Oh, Kathy, tornado sirens. That is not good. Please stay safe. Brian, hello. Oh, no problem, Kathy, about the caps. Why would they take her out of the house and then bring her body back? She was never taken out of the house. Never. Never, ever. She was left in the house, in a basement, in a secret room that Marvin and Linda Pugh, or Linda Hoffman-Pugh, both knew about. In fact, when John was down in the basement the day that she disappeared with the police on the morning of December 26th, and then the house was getting out of control, and there was only one detective there who took John and his friend to the basement, and they saw the broken window. John looked at it and said, "Ooh, perhaps I might have done that." And that seemed to be a weird statement at the time. But the reason he said that is because we talked about this before in another video briefly, that they had previously locked themselves out of the house, and John had to break through the basement window. And by the way, the basement windows were not alarmed in the house. They were not alarmed. And they had hired Linda Hoffman-Pugh's husband, Mervyn Pugh, who's a very odd-looking, he could be in the movies, this guy, let me tell you. May he rest in peace. He had been hired to take care of that window. And the Ramseys thought that window, they didn't go down in the basement very often. The housekeepers, the staff went down there. They didn't know that I think he might have even been paid for it. I'm not sure of that because I wasn't there, remember, but he didn't fix the window. Okay. But he knew about the broken window. Linda Hoffman-Pugh knew about she was the one that brought her husband in to do little odd jobs sometimes when the Ramseys needed a handyman. Now, when this first happened, the police asked the Ramseys, "Have you recently fired anybody? Has anybody asked you for money?" And John had fired someone at his company, but didn't suspect him. And Patsy was like, "Well, yeah, the housekeeper, Linda Hoffman-Pugh." And that's the radar went up with the police because I think it was in December, she had been asking for money, and she was, paid well. Plus, she had received a Christmas bonus, but she had borrowed or asked to borrow $2,000 from Patsy. Patsy did not say no, but Patsy was going to think about it. But when she talked about it later, the woman supposedly changed her story multiple times as to why she needed the money, and Patsy decided against it. And Linda Hoffman-Pugh was not happy that she wasn't going to get an extra $2,000 on top of her salary and on top of her Christmas bonus and on top of the money that they were also paying her husband to do jobs around the house that he wasn't even completing, apparently. And that put Linda Hoffman-Pugh on the radar. Now, I'm not saying this woman's involved. I'm not saying anybody's involved or anybody did this, but she became a person of interest who was later cleared publicly by the Boulder Police Department. Although she could not provide an alibi for her husband, and her husband could not provide an alibi for her. And she did turn on the Ramseys when it became apparent to her that the police were now suspecting her. And years later, the Ramseys wrote a book. And it was very much like my suspect video in the Nancy Guthrie case, where I don't name anybody, but I go over the list of characters to this date. Well, there was this person, then there was this person's name came up, and then there was this person. And the Ramseys did the same thing. And of course, out of all the people that they discussed, they had to mention the housekeeper, Linda Hoffman-Pugh. And she filed some sort of a federal lawsuit against them, like, I'm going to get you for naming me. And they never said that she did it. In fact, Patsy said to John, oh, she loved John Benet. She can't be involved in this. But she was mentioned in the book because she became a person of interest by the police. And when she tried to sue, guess what? Linda Hoffman-Pugh, she lost that lawsuit. And not only did she lose the lawsuit, but then she filed a federal appeal and she lost that as well. She couldn't sue the Ramseys and say, hey, they named me as a suspect. Her case was thrown out of court. The appeal was a failure. So I don't care who the police says is clear. In my mind, other than I don't think the Ramseys are involved in this and they don't know who did this. I'm not naming Linda Hoffman-Pugh as a suspect is what I'm saying. But she has now made the news again. All these years later, she is making the news this week because apparently she has passed away. City of Greeley, Colorado. Oh boy, people out here. Oh boy. Time out. Okay, thank you. Come back tomorrow. Everybody is entitled to an opinion, Carson. I've actually known people that have been involved in this investigation in the past. Not currently, but in the past. And there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that points against them. And I kind of have an idea about this case, just like I have an idea, a very strong idea about the Nancy Guthrie case, but I cannot say. Uh, in the JonBenet Ramsey case, there was a ransom note that was left at the scene that was taken from a piece of paper from the Ramsey household and a pen that was used from the Ramsey household. However, nobody, murders their child and then writes a 4-page ransom and then calls 911. It's impossible. That didn't happen. Uh, that note was written elsewhere and was brought into that house by somebody who knew the Ramseys. Remember, in the Elizabeth Smart case, Elizabeth Smart was kidnapped by someone that the mother brought into the house as a worker. It's very possible that that could be the situation here. It's possible that it's not the situation here. Remember, she was a beauty pageant queen, and she was very well known. They even had I forget what they call it, but it was some sort of their house was on a map where you could walk through their house at Christmas time. Total strangers came in and looked at their house. There's a lot of possibilities, and Boulder had a lot more crime than people thought it did. There were a lot of registered S offenders in that immediate area of Boulder. You wouldn't think so in a rich neighborhood, but there was. So I just want to go over this story just a little bit. Okay. Here's what I found since last night. I am speaking about Linda Hoffman-Pugh, the housekeeper of the Ramseys. Let's see. It says the investigation into the brutal murder of child beauty queen JonBenet Ramsey has taken another shocking turn with the death of the family housekeeper who was once named a person of interest. That is true. In the case that has gripped America's attention for nearly 30 years. Yeah, can you believe it? This coming Christmas, which is only 6 months away, that it will be 30 years since the JonBenet Ramsey case happened. Linda Hoffman-Pugh, who died May the 2nd at age 82, was working for the Ramseys when 6-year-old JonBenet was found dead in their Boulder, Colorado home the day after Christmas in 1996. At press time, Hoffman-Pugh's cause of death was still a mystery. In the aftermath of the Tykes killing, Hoffman-Pugh claimed in a 1999 interview with the Daily Camera that Patsy Ramsey, the child's mother, had named her as a possible suspect. But Dad John Benet Ramsey tells the National Enquirer that his late wife knew Hoffman-Pugh well, and Patsy said early on that if Linda was involved, she would never hurt John Benet Ramsey. So maybe she didn't say she wasn't involved, but if she was involved, she wouldn't have hurt her. So that's a little different than what I said earlier. The housekeeper was eventually cleared by authorities, true, but sued Patsy and John over claims in their book, The Death of Innocence, The Untold Story of John Benet Ramsey Murder and How Its Exploitation Compromised the Pursuit of Truth. And by the way, I read that book. It was an excellent book. So basically, they were saying that she may have played a role in John Benet's death. A federal court dismissed the suit, and the decision was upheld on appeal. Oh, wow. Welcome, hard to please guy. I'll see you again tomorrow. Oh, geez. So, yeah, she not only had the lawsuit tossed out, but she even lost her appeal, which means it was just frivolous. Wasn't there male DNA left on John Benet? I believe so. Odd connection to Housekeeper. Uh, yeah, she was one of many, many people of interest. Now, we're not saying here that she's involved in this at all. Hoffman-Pugh joins a growing list of witnesses, investigators, and persons of interest who have died since the pageant princess was snatched from her bed on Christmas Day, as abused, well, they're not really positive about that, then bludgeoned and garroted. Yeah, just like Nancy, snatched from her bed. Among the deceased are famed forensic pathologist Dr. Henry Lee, who hunted for DNA evidence during the early stages of the still unsolved murder and died in March at age 87, and Patsy, who passed of ovarian cancer at age 49 in 2006. Yeah, that was so sad because she was a stage 4 ovarian cancer survivor. Uh, Retired Detective Lou Schmidt. Now, believe me, I know this. He was originally hired by the district attorney's office to get the Ramseys. And within 20 minutes, he was like, oh my God, these poor people didn't do it. So this article here says retired Detective Lou Schmidt, and he was legendary in Colorado, who was hired by John, and that was later on, after he refused to work for the district attorney's office to get John, hired by John to investigate his daughter's heartbreaking case, died in 2010. That's true, but his daughter is continuing his efforts even today as we speak. And Bill McReynolds, a close family friend and person of interest who was never charged, passed in 2002. Now, I wouldn't say that he was a close family friend, but Bill McReynolds was the guy that played the Santa Claus that came to the Ramsey Christmas party that was maybe a week or two before John Benet's death. Last year, Tom Haney Jr., the hard boiled Denver Police Department detective brought in to interrogate and unsuccessfully elicit a confession from Patsy, died suddenly in August at age 77. In 2024, and I didn't know this makes me sad because this person was a very key witness. In 2024, a neighbor who reportedly heard John Benet's blood-curdling death scream passed away at age 77. Yeah, not only did she hear it, and they did a sound test later on to prove that she could have heard it across the street, after she went back to sleep, her husband heard somebody or something pulling the metal grate over that little hub or that little hatch that went down to the basement window. There was like a little area around it where you had to jump in, and it was covered with a metal grate. Somebody in the wee hours of the night after the lady across the street woke up from the this death-curdling scream of a young child, and she didn't know what it was or where it came from at the time. Her husband then heard somebody pulling that grate over that little entrance to the basement, through the same window that Linda Hoffman-Pugh's husband, Merv, who, by the way, um, people in Boulder used to not only say that Linda was a beach whale, but they would refer to Merv as Merv the Perv. And I'm not sure why that is, and I don't want to know. So I was not aware that in 2024, a neighbor who reportedly heard John Benet Ramsey's blood-curdling death scream passed away at age 77. And she's a key witness. A lot of these people are key witnesses. And so if somebody gets caught, all these years later, which I doubt because I think several people involved in this are since deceased, it would be a really hard case to prosecute now because so many people are past, including Patsy. Uh, it is with heavy hearts. And here's this. Here's the obit. It's with heavy hearts we share the passing of our beloved mother, Linda Hoffman-Pugh. Linda passed away peacefully on May 2nd, 2026, at the age of 82. She was a longtime resident of Fort Morgan in Greeley, Colorado, and had many longtime friendships with many people in Fort Morgan. Linda was born in Atlanta, Kansas on February 20th, 1944, to Charles and Juanita Babcock. Her greatest joy was her family. And then it goes on, talks about who her family was, who was preceded in death before her, to include her husband, one of her daughters, and one of her grandsons. Who sent me the flow state? Kathy Mallory, always coming through. Thank you for the flow state. I appreciate that. The open window was opportunity for homeless people. Yes, James Smythe. In fact, the immediate neighbor, if you're looking at this house in the green screen, to the right, and I don't know which direction that is because I don't know which direction the house faces, but to the right, there was a neighbor on that side, saw a man sometime around 5:30 that evening, um, walking between the properties and noticed it out the window and thought, "Who's that?" And it was a younger white male. Like, who's that? Traipsing through the snow. And by the way, that particular side of the house near the basement window, that part of the yard, the snow had melted. So, when this case became chaos and became worldwide, they were like, oh, well, there was never footprints in the snow. Well, that's because near the basement window, there wasn't any snow. That side the sun had hit that side, whether it was hitting while it was rising or while it was setting. That side of the house, the snow is melted. And, I've lived in mostly warm weather climates, but I've also lived on the East Coast and I have seen occasional snow, and snow does not melt evenly in the yard. So there were places, like in the front of the house, that had snow, where there were places in the back that didn't have any snow, including the back alleyway. Mountain weather is zany here. James Smythe, where are you located at? Hey, Rita Close, welcome in. Uh, there were homeless people in the area. There were S offenders in the area. There was someone who had been asking Patsy Ramsey for money, and that happened to be Linda Hoffman-Pugh, who allegedly asked for $2,000. And she wasn't denied the money at first. Patsy needed to think about it, or maybe she needed to discuss it with her husband. But at a later date and time, when the housekeeper was pushing for that money, she gave multiple stories as to why she needed it. And Patsy decided at that time against it. And it wasn't that she didn't want to loan her the money, but she thought she was being lied to. And by the way, apparently a couple weeks before this happened, the housekeeper made a very strange statement one day, and she said, "Aren't you afraid she's going to be kidnapped?" That's weird to say something like that. Can you imagine going and working as a babysitter or a housekeeper in someone's house and then saying, "Aren't you worried she's going to be kidnapped?" And then 2 weeks later, she's found dead in the basement of the house, and there's a ransom note on the stairs leading from the second story to the kitchen, the back stairs. I find that very odd. In fact, if I were a homicide investigator on that case, I don't know, that might set off alarm bells to me. Um, what would also bother me is to find out that a guy who was later accused of unaliving himself, even though he really didn't, And remember, these were the same bumbling idiot cops that didn't know how to investigate the Ramsey case because there weren't a lot of homicides in Boulder. So they just didn't have, they had narcotics detectives assigned to that case. Maybe those were the same idiot cops that went out to the Michael Helgoth residence and went, ah, it's a suicide. Let's just, we'll just wrap this up and with a neat little bow and moving on. I don't know. Turns out he was supposedly dating the daughter of Linda Hoffman-Pugh. It's a small world. Flow State. Who sent the Flow State? Caden, welcome. Welcome in, Caden. So, hey, Texas Diane, didn't see you come in. DK and 68, didn't see you come in. I see the little kitty avatar. That's so cute. Um, yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of other suspects. There was someone that John had fired. There was someone named Chris Wolf whose name came up. Um, there was a registered S offender in the area who has since gone to prison for other crimes, who, has had the finger pointed at him over the years. There was this mentally ill person who was flown from Thailand who wasn't even in Boulder, Colorado, and he confessed to the crime years later, and I knew that was just some crazy guy. He has since, he has not done any time for it, and he apparently is now living in Thailand and has been had a gender reassignment surgery, so I've heard. Um, he was just a little off, and not because he became a transgender person, but he confessed to a crime that he did not commit, and he was not even in the state at the time that that crime occurred. So, there's a long, long, long list. There was even someone who was making threatening phone calls to John Ramsey years later who knew very specific details of the crime and very specific details of the inside of their home. And he was trying to extort money. Like, if you send me money for a plane ticket, I'll fly to Boulder and I'll turn myself in. And, of course, it was just someone trying to extort money. But at the same time, he knew about things that he couldn't possibly know. And, remember the ransom note, everybody. Um, we are a group. Those are very important 4 words in the beginning of the ransom note. We are a group. I don't think this was um, a lone wolf. I feel the same way about the Nancy Guthrie case. Now, that's a little different, that case, because we don't know what happened to Nancy. We don't know where she is. But remember the movie Fargo? We've talked about this a lot in the Nancy Guthrie case. People do hire people to commit crimes, and sometimes because you have to hire a criminal to commit a crime, and criminals are bad people and they're not very intelligent, things can and do go wrong. Things go wrong. Things don't go as planned. That could be the case in the Nancy Guthrie disappearance. That could also be the case in the John Benet Ramsey case. Now, as I've said throughout this video, everybody is innocent until proven guilty. I'm not naming this lady a suspect, but she was asking for money. That doesn't mean she's a suspect. Um, she did fight for the innocence of the Ramseys, but when the tables turned on her, then she was like, "Oh, well, I think Patsy Ramsey did it." From what I'm hearing, remember, I wasn't there. I'm not a cop in Boulder. I was not, you know, I wasn't privy to these interrogations. But there's a lot of people who have since written books. Some of these books are probably very legit. Some of these books are probably, clickbaity. As are the articles that you would read in, like, the National Enquirer or the Globe magazine or Star magazine. There's a lot of clickbait titles in stories. James Smythe, like Fargo. Yeah, I love that movie. I absolutely adore that movie. Um, Great writing, great acting, wonderful film. But even though it was fiction, excuse me, I gotta swallow that ice cube. There's ice. melting ice in this cup. Um, even though that was fiction, it's very true. It was very well written because things do go wrong. It happens all the time in M's for hires, unalivings for hires, kidnappings, attempted kidnappings. Things do go wrong. Uh, and she is on the list. I don't care who they say is cleared. Just like, the Pima County Sheriff says that the family has been cleared in the Nancy Guthrie case. Well, the FBI hasn't cleared anybody. The FBI hasn't cleared anybody in the John Benet Ramsey case. In my mind, nobody is clear. Will this case ever be solved? I don't think so. It's too late. It's 30 years later almost. And a lot of the people that are involved in this case or involved as witnesses or people of interest or people that have evidence have since passed, including Patsy, including Linda Hoffman-Pugh, including Detective Lou Schmidt, Bill McReynolds, the Santa Claus, one of the Denver Police Department's detectives, Tom Haney. Um, a lot of people have passed. And, John, I think he's 82, almost 83 now. He's a key witness to all of this because he's the one that found the body. How much longer does John Ramsey have? I mean, I hope he looked pretty good last time I saw him in an interview, but you have to realize he's soon to be 83 years old. Um, Nobody here lives forever. In 30 years, there's a lot of people from this case that are no longer, including the first character in this soap opera to pass was this Michael Landon Helgoth. And for as far as I know, the police never connected his relationship to Linda Hoffman-Pugh's family and his alleged unaliving, self-unaliving was very shoddy police work and very questionable. Um, it would be absolutely impossible for him to have taken himself out the way that he took himself out. And it is believed that he was taken out by a left-handed person. And we don't know who the left-handed person is. I don't know who the psychic is that said she saw a man with the letter M and she saw the name Marvin. I would love to look that up. I'm gonna research that tonight. Who was the psychic who named a Marvin in this case? And it turns out that Linda Hoffman-Pugh's husband was named Mervyn, and that neither one of them allegedly had an alibi for each other the night of the crime. Once again, everybody here is innocent till proven guilty. I don't know how many years Linda Hoffman-Pugh left that front porch light on because they said she never turned off her lamp. Never. It was on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days in the year, and she said she would keep that light burning bright until whoever was responsible for the JonBenet Ramsey case was found. And, this video is not really about JonBenet Ramsey and her sad demise, but it's more about the story here is the passing of Linda Hoffman-Pugh. I wish I had heard about this after it happened. I don't know why it's just catching the news wire now, a month later. But, her obituary was published, but I guess if you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't have known. For some reason, this is just, this has become a big story in the last 24 to 48 hours, I guess. Uh, it's interesting. I'm sure it'll be in the rag sheets and, certain magazines will be pointing fingers again. But she has been reportedly cleared by the police. Hello, Caden. Didn't see you come in. Brian says, saw a recent John Ramsey interview that is hopeful new GGI DNA analysis will provide a good result. Maybe. They don't know if that DNA that was found, especially the DNA that was found on the underwear, on the panty, if that was something that was deposited at the time of the crime, or if that could have been DNA on the panty by possibly someone involved in the manufacturing of that panty. But I've also heard that she may have scratched somebody, and if that's the case, they may have obtained DNA from underneath JonBenet's fingernails. They've never really discussed fully the DNA that they have that does not match anyone in the Ramsey family. Remember that house? There were so many people that had access to that house. They had the Christmas party. They had the house open for tour. Um, and that doesn't seem like a house that would be a filthy house, as this housekeeper said it was a filthy house that, Patsy Ramsey lived in a dirty house, like, but yet people, total strangers, were coming in like they were looking at a museum. A lot of conflicting information on this case. But yeah, I would say rest in peace, Linda Hoffman-Pugh. Uh, yeah, uh, it's interesting. Very interesting. They found DNA on her leggings recently. Hey, Cheryl. It matches the DNA in her underwear. Oh, still unknown, but they're looking for a match. Well, that's good news. Kathy Mowry says, this is an interesting topic. I gave up and quit watching TV. I'm glad to find out today. I always wondered what happened. Yeah, we still don't know what has happened. And I am probably going to keep this shorter today because I did wake up with a little vertigo, as I said earlier. And so the chat's kind of like, ooh, it's kind of hard for me to follow it. Just like, ooh, I've been fighting this vertigo for a very, very long time. And it's not terrible, but I could feel it a little bit when I was in bed, like when I would roll to the left, and I'm like, uh-oh. Well, Kathy, make sure you stay safe from those tornadoes. Oh, did I miss anybody here? I hope I didn't miss anybody coming in. Oh, James, you're from Longmont. It's the next town over from Boulder. Well, James, let me ask you, did you live in Colorado at the time of the JonBenet Ramsey case? I actually have, it's either a second cousin or it's a first cousin once removed that lives in Boulder. And apparently he loves it there. No, you were attending Villanova University in Pennsylvania. Okay. Is this still a big story, James, in Colorado? Or have people just moved on? I mean, we're only in the beginning of the 5th month of the Nancy Guthrie case, and a lot of people are already trying to move on. But this case, I think this case is one of the biggest cases that I've ever seen in the news in my lifetime. In fact, I was out of town when this case happened, and I remember hearing about it on the TV. And it caught my attention. Like, ooh, people have moved on. Kathy, why would they want people inside of their house like that? Yeah, it was on some sort of a tour, and I can't remember the name of the tour. Oh my God! I'll talk about that in a minute, Kathy. So Roth, I knew you were okay because last time you were in here, you said that um, you were going to be away for a while. I got to get a special button just for Saraf. Oh my god. Oh my god, Saraf, Saraf. Bemis says, "Hi all, this is a huge case. I can't imagine just letting it go." And back to Kathy. Yeah, I'd have to look it up, but it was called the Boulder Tour of Homes or something like that that they had at Christmas time. And Patsy had the house on that list, and people were coming in the house. Saraf. Okay. Five high horns for Saraf. Oh my God, how are you doing? Were you busy with work, Saraf? I am so glad to see you. I was just thinking about you yesterday, and I mentioned you in my live. Like, we haven't heard from Saraf in a while, but I know he's okay. Oh God. Thank you again. Everybody, give Saraf a like on his super chats. I really appreciate that. Every little bit helps. Oh my gosh. Oh, I knew it was coming. They sold that house, didn't they? Yes, BMS. Actually, quite a few people have owned that house, and I think the University of Colorado at Boulder may have owned that house for a while. It was recently sold again, I think, for $8 million. I'll have to look that up. Uh, and that fence that you see in the background, uh, that wasn't there at the time of the Ramseys living there. Yeah, you know what? I wouldn't be able to live there because it's a four-level house. It's like, it's huge. It's worth millions, but it's got thousands of square feet, and there's, a basement, and then there's the first floor above the basement, and then there's the second floor, which was the living area for the children, and then there was a third floor. Can you imagine all those stairs? I couldn't even do it. Uh, Yes, I am okay, thanks. I see I came in at the right time. Keep rocking and good luck. I'll be gone for a while. Stay safe. You too, my friend. Thanks for checking in again. And we will see you whenever we see you, Saraf. Thank you so much again. So, yeah, and I know it's like 10 hours ahead there, so it's probably the middle of the night there where you are. But thank you for coming in. Yeah, I would have a hard time because it's just too big. There's too many doors. They even have like what's called a butler's exit that's from the kitchen. I don't know how many back doors there are. There's the house was alarmed when the Ramseys moved in, but the basement windows were not alarmed. Uh, and remember that alarm had gone off one or two times while the Ramseys were in the house, and the police department, the fire department, ambulances, paramedics, all responded, private security. And they had to put John Benet in the car seat in the garage because, they were trying to figure out how they were like, how come you don't, if you live in this house, how come you can't turn off the alarm? And the neighbors were coming out. It was a huge spectacle. And after it was all said and done with, they were just like, oh my God, can you imagine if that happened while we were sleeping? We would die of a heart attack. Uh, you know, but there were many parts of that house that weren't hooked up to the alarm, including the broken basement window that John Ramsey thought it had been fixed, but when he came down to that basement where he had been for probably months, came down there with Detective Linda Arn and his friend, he saw it and said, "Oh, perhaps I did that," because he had broken the window in the past, but he thought that Linda Hoffman-Pugh's husband, Merv, had fixed it. Um, A butler's pantry, that's what it was called. Oh, Kathy, you were so helpful. A butler's pantry. I think by gosh, she's got it. I'm putting somebody in a timeout right now. The butler's pantry. Yeah. And remember, half a boulder, as we talked about this before while we were talking about Nancy, sometimes we go off on other subjects. Half a boulder had a key to that house, including there was one under the front mat, because apparently the door only unlocked from one side, and Patsy went out to greet somebody outside, and John Benet shut the door behind her and the door locked, and she was stuck. And once again, I don't know if they even changed the locks once they moved into the house. They didn't know how to work the alarm properly. Not every part of the house was attached to the alarm. And apparently, there were not motion sensors inside the house. So if somebody crawled through a window, even if the front door and the back door was alarmed, they could still come in and out through a window. I'm going to look that up. Thank you, Kathy. You are so helpful. A butler's pantry. Yes. Um, hey, Roscoe. I don't know, V Miss. That's a very good question, but a lot of people had the key to the house. And after the crime, they were advised by the police to go contact all the different people that they had given keys to and get those keys back. And they only ever recovered about half of them. A lot of people had a key. But I think the people involved, at least the person on the inside of the house, came in that night, Christmas night. They had gone out to dinner with some close friends. And I think they had turned on the alarm that night before they left, but somebody came in through uh, the window. Now, I did hear that butler's pantry door was found open after the fact, but I don't know if that's true because, once again, I've never been to Boulder, Colorado, and I did not investigate this case. And I have seen the autopsy report and I have read a lot of the books, but that was years ago. A lot's happened to me in the last, you know, 10 years as far as my health. So, memory can fade over time. A lot of food prep gets done in a butler's pantry. Yeah, I'm hearing that Patsy wasn't a good cook either, and that's the reason they didn't hire a chef apparently, which seems odd if he was a millionaire, and that there was a restaurant, I forget the name of it. I just read about it again yesterday that they would eat there at least 3 or 4 times a week because he didn't like Patsy's food. And he also apparently didn't like the way she kept house. Apparently, there were some issues going on there in the marriage. And the kids did have chronic bedwetting issues, both of the children. And Burke, he seemed to have some really deep issues at the time because he was accused of smearing his own feces in John Benet's bedroom. So there were some issues going on at that house. And this is all alleged, remember. What do you think? Who do you think did it? I can't say that on my YouTube channel. I got a lot of emails. I'll have to look through it when I'm not like on the air and check it again. But somebody sent me a video about a man in Tucson in a mask on the Nancy Guthrie case, and I said we just did a whole video on that. So like, but I think that was somebody else. I think Burke had autism. V Miss, I've always thought that too. And I have a nephew that has autism. Now, there's different spectrums of autism. Some are severe and some are minimal. Uh, I think you've hit the nail right on the head. I do think that Burke had autism, but I don't think that Burke Ramsey would know how to tie a garrote or a garrote, a sophisticated knot, and strangle somebody, nor would he, at 9 years old, have the strength to hit somebody over the head so hard with a baseball bat that it would make an 8 or 9-inch crack in a person's skull. I just don't believe that. Oh, okay. I did see that, and I'm gonna check that out. I just saw a screenshot. VMIS says, "Okay, I sent you an email for a petition to sign for juice." I will sign the petition, but I just opened it up on my phone. I didn't open it up on my computer, like my desktop yet. So I don't know if there's a link in there or I'm gonna have to go find the link. But I do know that there is a petition, and I will be very happy to sign it today. Kathy Maurer, yes, April, I think something happened yesterday and I guess something froze up, but you appeared to be sleeping. And I was worried about you. Didn't freeze on my end. I remember seeing that. I was like, are you talking about me? I wish I could fall asleep that easily, Kathy. And I would be worried too if I saw that because I wouldn't just, "Boop, that's not me." I can't even sleep in a hospital when I'm in critical condition. VMIS says, yes, I work with special needs children. Oh, bless you. And my granddaughter has autism too. Yeah, my nephew has it, but he has a very bad case of it. Like, Burke Ramsey, he went to college and, got a degree. And I've heard that, what is he, a software engineer or something? Something to do with computers, but he like works on his own or something. And I saw the interview with him and Dr. Phil, and he still seems a little off, but he's super intelligent. Um, You tried to send a link, but not very tech savvy. Yeah, I'll go look for it. Kathy Maury says, my housekeeper son has autism. Yeah, it's everywhere. I'm fine. I have a little vertigo today, but I'm fine. Yeah, my nephew is sort of a low functioning autism, but he's still very smart, but he's low functioning. He wouldn't be able to go to college like Burke Ramsey or even speak. But yeah, I've always thought that too. But I've never suspected him as a suspect in this case, and the police have not either. I watch a YouTube channel, their daughter is nonverbal. Whose daughter? Yeah, VMIS says I haven't either. Nope. Yeah, definitely not. You remember in Fargo, the husband hires a bad guy or guys, it doesn't work out. By the end of the movie, I lost track of the body count. Things can go wrong. And that could even explain the Nancy Guthrie situation. Maybe the crime was intended as something that it ended up being something else and everything went wrong. Don't know yet. And once again, I'm not naming any suspects. Uh I have a list of people that I think are involved in this, whether it was directly or indirectly. But I wouldn't name anybody publicly because it's still an active investigation and they have new types of DNA, well, not DNA, they don't have new DNA evidence, but they have new ways of investigating DNA that they didn't have in 1996 and 1997. Kathy Mowry says, that is why I wouldn't want strangers in my home. Exactly. Whose daughter is nonverbal? Yeah, I feel sorry for Burke, actually. Oh, interesting. B. Miss says, heard something new on the Nancy Guthrie case. They got the name of the lady who lived in the casita, and she has a family member who was arrested for kidnapping. I will check that out. Oh, Kathy says it was a creator on YouTube. Okay. Yeah, lots of autism cases out there. So, I mean, he had his issues. John Benet had her issues. We don't know why, though. And since I don't know the Ramseys, I've never met the Ramseys, and I never met John Benet or Burke Ramsey. I'm not even going to venture a guess as to what was going on in that house. But this Linda Hoffman-Pugh was a person of interest at one time, as I do believe her husband, Mervyn Pugh, was a person of interest at one time, although people were more leaning towards Linda Hoffman-Pugh, but she was one of many, many people, that were people of interest. Just like see my suspect video on Nancy Guthrie. These are the characters as the world turns. You know, Same thing with the Ramsey case. You know how many books there are? Probably enough to fill a library on this case. VMIS says the first time I saw Burke on TV, I knew it was autism. I've always thought that. Yeah, it's it is what it is. And rest in peace, Linda Hoffman Pugh. That's all I can say. It said she passed away peacefully. Maybe it was just natural causes, but they have not released a cause of death. I've heard that too, Texas Diane, that Elon Musk has autism. I've heard that he's a high functioning autistic. And you know what? That actually makes a lot of sense I mean, I don't know that it's true, but it could be. He's super smart. Whether you love him or you hate him, he is super smart. So, yeah, I don't really have much more to say, but a lot of there's a lot of people that were involved in this case that are no longer with us. And, God bless John Ramsey, 82, almost 83. How much longer is he going to be with us? I mean, he looked good. Last interview I saw him in recently, he looked really good for his age, but you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Yeah, I like that movie too, but that shows a very high functioning autistic person. A lot of families they're not that fortunate with some of their children. So that movie is actually hard on families that have autistic children that are like severe. Uh, Although there are people that fit that mold exactly. I'm sure you've heard of Natalie Holloway case. Yes, here in Alabama, absolutely. Her mother and Mr. Ramsey dated for a couple years. I'm aware of that. He came when they were searching for her and they hit it off. Absolutely. They had something in common that brought them together. They both had um, either a missing child or an unalive child. They both lost a daughter. Yeah, autism does go from one extreme to the other. I'm sure people that have a high functioning autistic child would get a kick out of that movie. But people who don't know anything about autism would think like, "Oh, all autistic people are like, Rain Man," but it's not like that in the real world. I did watch the movie, though. I did enjoy that. You are so right, it's not. So right about what? Remember, I'm feeling a little vertigo today. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are undiagnosed autistic. But yeah, I think Burke could be on the spectrum. I'm not a doctor, but he could be. He's a little different. He's also been through a lot in his life. So, I don't have anything new to report on Nancy. I just wanted to report this breaking news. Not that it just happened today, it happened on May the 2nd, but I just heard about it, and a lot of people are just hearing about the, oh, I just had a little blood pressure moment there. I hate when that happens. I'm just like, "Ooh." So anyway, I've said everything I was gonna say today. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Saraf, for the super chats. Thank you for the people that sent the jewels. And if there's anything new to report on any of these cases, I'll be happy to come back on the air later, but I'm just gonna try to rest and take it easy today. So everybody have a good